Introduction and disclaimer. This video shows all devices in a non-production environment. The devices, in most cases, are off or are fully unplugged from any external power source in order to clearly show the removal and replacement procedures and other aspects of the devices. The instructions in this video are current as of September 2014. Please consult the product manuals for the latest updates and instructions. Before watching this video, you should have already watched the caveats, disclaimers, and warnings video for required information. The NetBackup 5330 appliance rail kit that holds the 5330 in the computer rack is a customer replaceable unit. Should the rail kit fail for any reason, it should be replaced as soon as possible to prevent any injury that may occur due to faulty rail components. Before you can replace the rail kit for the 5330, you will need to power down the 5330 and remove all of the data and communication cables from the back of the appliance. But before you perform any service on the 5330, all running programs on the appliance must be stopped and the appliance shut down. Be sure to coordinate this action with the system administrator who will be performing the appliance shutdown procedure. Most customer contacts will want to own or coordinate this step. You can confirm that the appliance has been shut down by viewing the LED indicators on the control panel. If the appliance has been shut down, the LEDs should be off. The LED indicators for the discs on the front of the appliance should also be off, as well as the LED indicators located on the rear of the appliance. Check to confirm that there is no active disc or fan noise and no airflow coming out of the rear panel of the 5330. Contact the customer if the appliance is still on and have them perform the appliance site shutdown procedures. Once the appliance has been properly shut down, put on a grounded ESD-compliant wrist strap and label all of the data and communication cables connected to the 5330 on the rear panel with removable labels so that they can be easily returned to their origin after the rail replacement procedure has been completed. When disconnecting the fiber optic cables, depress the clip located on the bottom of the fiber optic cable connector and then pull the connector out of the SFP transceiver. If available, place the fiber cable plastic guards into the opening of the fiber optic cable tubes, and then set the cable aside so that it cannot be damaged or be pointed into a person's eye. Using temporary labels, label and then disconnect all other data cables. Unplug the AC power cords. To remove the chassis from the rack, first remove the front bezel on the appliance. Locate and unscrew the two screws on the edges of the front panel of the appliance that secure the 5330 to the rack. Slide the chassis fully forward out of the rack until the rail guides lock. With the guide rails fully extended and locked, locate the blue tabs at the front of the rail assemblies. Warning: with drives installed, the appliance can weigh up to 52 pounds. Improper handling can result in injury or damage to the appliance. When moving or lifting the appliance, use proper technique and tools. With a person on each side of the appliance, place one hand underneath the unit and pull the blue tabs back to release the front studs in the chassis rails. Lift the front of the appliance to release the front studs from the cutouts in the guide rails. Place your other hand under the back of the chassis for support and continue to tilt the appliance upward to release the middle and rear studs. After the appliance is removed from the rack, place it on a flat ESD-compliant surface. With the 5330 appliance safely removed and out of the way, collapse the rails completely so that they fit inside of the rack. This procedure can be performed by a single service technician. Using two service technicians will help to prevent damage from occurring to other equipment or devices that may reside in the same rack as the 5330. Before you remove the old rails from the rack, record the position of the rails within the rack, if the rack is marked, so that when you install the new rails, they will reside in the same space. If the rack is not marked, you can use a piece of tape to temporarily mark the rail positions before removing the old rails. Using one service technician located at the front of the left rail and one at the rear of the left rail, examine the front and back of the rail locking mechanism. Each rail has a silver peg on the top of each rail, both in the front and back. The blue peg, located at the bottom of each rail, locks the rail in its place in the rack. To remove the rail, press in on the blue peg while applying a twisting motion to dislodge the front of the rail from the rack. Repeat the same process for the back of the same rail. After the rail has been removed from the rack, repeat the process for the rail installed on the right of the rack for the 5330 appliance. With both rails removed from the rack, examine the rack for any potential damage that may exist before attempting to install new rails. If the rack is free of any damage, you can locate the replacement rails and begin the rail installation process. Before you install the 5330 appliance into the rack, you should determine the installation positions of the guide rails that will hold the 5330 in the rack. If you recorded the position of the old rails or marked the position with a piece of tape before removing the old rail kit, you can start the rail installation process using that information. If you did not mark the position of the old rails, you must determine where to install the new rail kit. The space in the rack is divided into U's. The 5330 appliance has a 2U form factor. That means that when it's installed into the rack, it will occupy two 1U spaces. To determine where to install the 5330, consider the components of both the rail kit and the front of the 5330 appliance. If you look at the front of one of the rails, there is a silver peg at the top of the rail, and a blue peg at the bottom of the rail. The rail will use the top 1U of the 2U space that the 5330 occupies. The 5330 appliance has two built-in screws located in the front of the appliance that will secure it to the rack using two captive snap-in cage nuts. To install the rack rails, identify the 1U on each side of the rack where you decide to install the rails, and then verify that there is one complete U available under the U used for rail installation. Locate the left rail with the L at the front end. The L faces the left side wall of the rack. Guide the rail into the two holes in the 1U that you selected and hook the silver peg on the front of the rail into the top hole in the U. Snap the blue peg on the front of the rail into the bottom hole in the U. Repeat the process for the rear of the rail. Now repeat the process for the rail on the right side of the rack. Verify that both rails are parallel and fastened securely. Remove any tape or markings that you may have made on the rack. Test the new rails by pulling out both the rail extenders as far as they can easily and safely extend. The release button should click when the rails have been fully extended. Lift up on the guide rail release buttons and push the rails into the rack. They should extend and retract smoothly. Insert two snap-in screw locks into the rack immediately underneath the guide rails, if the old screw locks were removed when the faulty rails were removed. Pull out both of the rail extenders until the release buttons click, indicating that both rails have been fully extended. Using two service technicians, lift the 5330 appliance up and tilt the back of the device down towards the back of the rails. Insert the two rear standoff pegs, extending from the side of the device, into the rail slots at the back of the rail extenders. Slowly drop the front of the device into the rail slots at the front of the rail extenders. A peg in the middle and a peg at the front of the device fit into the rail slots. Lift up on the guide rail release buttons and push the device into the rack. Fasten the appliance to the rack with the two screws that are attached to the device. Screw them into the snap-in cage nuts previously attached to the rack in the correct position. Install the bezel to the front of the appliance by locating the notches in the inside edge of the bar that contains the front panel 5330 LEDs and buttons. Now align the tabs on the right side of the bezel with the notches and insert. Then align the tabs on the left side of the bezel with the notches in the bar. Press the bezel down until the tabs snap into place. If any attached external storage systems were powered off, turn on the external systems in the proper order and wait for them to initialize. The storage shelves can take up to 30 seconds to initialize. Press the power button on the front panel to start the chassis. After the appliance initializes, verify that the system status LED on the front panel is off. Contact the customer and confirm that they are satisfied with the repair. After completing the hardware replacement procedures, Symantec recommends that you remove all boxes and shipping containers from the area, recycling materials as much as possible. Return any equipment or tools as needed.